You are in the right place if you've come to talk or hear about talking about religion in the public. I'm Virginia Keeley, class from the College of 63, then a couple of other incidental degrees. 63 was a time when young people, young women in particular, were admonished not to talk about religion or politics in public. Then I came to the University of Chicago, where I learned something very different, much to the horror of my Lithuanian immigrant traditional family and parents. But enough about me. I'm here to very proudly and humbly introduce our speaker today, Margaret M. Mitchell. So I have some notes here because I don't want to get things wrong. Margaret Mitchell is indeed Dean of the Divinity School, but she's also a product of the University of Chicago's education, having received her master's in 1982 and her PhD in 1989. She joined the university faculty in 1998 and appointed to the deanship of the Divinity School in 2010. She's a literary historian of ancient Christianity, and her research and teaching span the range of topics in the New Testament and early Christian writings through the end of the 4th century. Dean Mitchell is also the author of 4 books and co-editor of the 2006 Cambridge History of Christianity, Volume 1, Origins to Constantine. Her special interests include the Pauline letters, and in their inaugural moments and in the history of their effects, and the intersection of text, image, and artifacts in the fashioning of Christian culture. So I must also show you this. You have an opportunity. This is Professor Mitchell's book, and it will be available to you at the end of the program. So that's a word from our sponsor. I'd like to add 2 comments because you can find her bio and her very impressive academic record on the website, and you can Google her and be even more impressed. But here's a comment from the former dean of the Divinity School upon Dean Mitchell's appointment. The former dean noted that Professor Mitchell's international reputation for outstanding scholarship was clear, and added, she understands the academic study of religion in its wider humanistic context. Here's a note from Mark Oppenheimer, the religion columnist for the New York Times, who noted that, quote, "It is hard to find intelligent talk about religion on TV. However, with or without a TV in this room this morning, I'm confident that Dean Mitchell will indeed talk about religion and will inspire us to have a part in it as well. But please, save your questions to, I should say, save your intelligent questions and comments until the end. We will have time for questions and answers. So for now, please join me in welcoming Dean Mitchell for her presentation on the role of the academic study of religion and contemporary media coverage.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Grishna. What a lovely introduction. And thank you to each of you for coming. I thought when I rode my bike here this morning that I would be the only one in the room because it's such a glorious day outside and you have a lot of other good, exciting things on the program that you could be at. So I'm honored and humbled by your presence. I do want to say, as Grishna has indicated, that I share with you the fact that the University of Chicago changed my life. It changed my life more than once, as you can see, both having been a student here and being a faculty member and then a dean, so at least 3 waves of that. And so I join you in the joy of the reunion weekend, thinking about this university that we love and that inspires us and challenges us every day. So this talking about religion in public. My own learning how to talk about religion in public took place here at the University of Chicago in the Divinity School, which I hope you visited while you're here, for the best coffee on campus at the Grounds of Being coffee shop in the basement of Swift Hall. And let me just lay out a few sort of basic ground rules for the academic study of religion. One is that there are no sacred cows. That is, that one can ask a question about anything. Religion is not protected in the academic environment, but rather it is studied with all of the tools of the humanistic, social sciences, even the physical sciences, as we seek to understand our world and its history. The University of Chicago Divinity School, which was the first professional school at the university, founded in 1892, from the very beginning was about non-dogmatic, non-sectarian study of all the world's religions. Our students who study Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Zoroastrianism, any number of other religious traditions, I have to emphasize to them how radical it was that back in the day they had Methodists sitting next to Presbyterians, sitting next to Congregationalists and others, that this itself within Christian denominational circles at the end of the 19th century was a surprise. And that was a part of the commitment of our academic ancestors. And as you may know, this university's first president was a biblical scholar, William Rainey Harper, a principle that religion should be studied like anything else in the context of the research university. That means thorough grounding in the sources, many of which are textual, not all of which are textual, and in the languages in which they're written. So just a few of the languages that are read and taught in the Divinity School and in the wider university that impinge on religion: Greek, Tibetan, Arabic, Sanskrit, German, Latin, Hebrew, Persian, Chinese, the list goes on. But also all of the artifactual evidence that we have about religion, both in the past and into the present. So art, archaeology, architecture, ritual implements, and other things. The student of religion needs not only to be a textual scholar, though I myself am trained as a textual scholar, but needs to be someone who can work maximally with the evidence that we have. Then a deep historical knowledge of complex traditions, traditions that often internally are seeking to make claims about a unitary and simple story, and often we as historians are recovering a great deal more complexity than the sources themselves are always allowing. And also, as is very much true to the University of Chicago, it's an interdisciplinary approach that crosses and involves all the disciplines, divisions, and schools of the university. On the Divinity School faculty right now are faculty with cross appointments in the Department of Philosophy, in the Department of Medicine and the Medical Center at the university, just as Divinity School faculty have cross appointments in South Asian languages and civilization, etc. This university is a magnificent context for the study of religion, and it does take a university to train a scholar of religion. So, this is my context. This is an illegible inscription that's in the first floor of Swift Hall that just says much of what I just said, that this building is dedicated to the study of religion. And it is dedicated to the study of religion by Mrs. Ann Higgins Swift. And I would make the claim that since 1925, the American and global landscape have changed unimaginably, and yet the importance and impact of religion in public life, locally and globally, certainly have not. So here is William Rainey Harper, an inscription that's it's a bronze cast that's on also the first floor of Swift Hall. Just want to articulate with Harper some of these key values for the academic study of religion as we carry them out here at Chicago. I've put them under the rubric of our university's motto, Crescat Scientia, let knowledge grow from more to more. the science for the study of religion was what our founders thought was necessary. And the grounding of the Chicago School is in good philology, that is language study, in historical knowledge, in analysis of cultures, in assessment of philosophies and philosophical systems of human thought, and of sociology. And sociology, as you may know, was also one of the key early Chicago schools of thought on the landscape of the early 20th century. And then vita excolator, that life may be enriched. How? Through rigorous research and teaching about religion, through cross-religious engagement within a secular university, and through learned, smart, public religious leadership, with an emphasis on the word public. And then, just to name one of my colleagues, and actually my advisor when I was an MA student in the Divinity School, Martin Marty, who for many still remains one of the foremost teachers of religion in the United States today. And Marty, still going strong in his 80s, gives more speeches a year than a congressional candidate does. And he is continually in demand from the media to comment on the issues of the day, whatever they may be. And I learned this very well when I first joined the faculty. I wound up getting Marty's old phone number. And the calls came in all the time from CNN and from PBS and other places. Can Marty comment on this, that, or the other thing? And of course, no one can be the omnibus person to comment on religion, but in some ways, Marty has been that for a generation. But as Grishna said, the hook for this talk is an article in May of 2012 by Mark Oppenheimer of the New York Times, in which Oppenheimer said that really the most significant teacher of religion in America today is the comedian Jon Stewart. And I thought that was a pretty interesting argument to make. Oppenheimer himself is trained in religion at Yale. And Jon Stewart is, I think, quite insightful about religion and doesn't shy away from controversial topics. Though one could ask whether we should leave to a comedian to educate the American public about religion. And of course, I'm going to say we should not. But I want to begin, though, with giving Jon Stewart his due, because he's going to both introduce for me what critical historically grounded analysis of religion looks like in the contemporary realm, and then I'm going to move to two case studies. Now, I'm about to try to get the technology to work, and so I ask you to close your eyes and click your heels together 3 times and hope that this is going to work. So I'm going to bounce out of here and into, please work. You may pray if you think it will help. You may roll dice if you think it will help. All right, here we go. Please work. Please work. Okay. I guess you're not very good at prayer. Oh, there it was. All right, don't worry. It's going to come. And you're going to be glad. But you have to sit through this ad for the iPad. So if you don't have an iPad, I hope you'll agree with me that this has been worth it. I apologize for... Do we have sound going here? Why is it... Okay. All right.
Two things we all know about the American entertainment industry. One, it is full of the country's kindest and most thoughtful people. And two,
Hollywood for years has underestimated how much we want to know more about the Bible and religion.
Anti-Christian bigotry is just fine in the entertainment industry.
Why doesn't Hollywood churn out more religious movies?
That's how you show respect for religion. You get in there and you churn some out. Well, have you heard the good news? Because this week's top action heroes of the box office are not only Captain America, but also Captain Sumeria. In 2 weeks of release, the Noah movies earned nearly $200 million worldwide, so religious filmgoers must have something to cheer about.
It is awful.
Did not see that coming. What's the issue?
They claim that the movie is unfaithful to one of the Bible's most famous tales.
There's definitely artistic liberties taken in the film. This movie is not a documentary.
So you're telling me the movie about a man who lives to 950 and loads 2 of every animal onto a 300-cubit-long boat. By the way, a cubit is from here to here. 300 of these bad boys. Yeah, that's going to keep the lions away from the delicious zebras. Listen, you're telling me that film won't qualify to submit in the documentary category? That's outrageous. I guess what they're trying to say is that this version is a bit different. Enjoy that? This version's a bit different than from what's in the Bible, but how different could Noah be?
It doesn't use the word God, not once throughout the entire film. No reference at all to God in the entire movie.
That is weird. Because if there's no God in the movie, who's telling him to build a boat? To go all water world, we bought a zoo on everyone. His dog?
The movie does use the word creator in referencing God. The problem is, though, that the Bible uses the word God.
Yeah, I mean, creator, that could mean anything. I mean, and while the Bible actually doesn't ever use the word God, because it's not in English, my guess is we're not really up for that discussion. But the question is creator enough? I mean, creator could be Xenu, could be Tyler the creator, could be the master builder. If only someone in the Noah film, if only someone in this film, like Noah's son Ham, said something clear and unequivocal, like, quote, "My father says there can be no king, the creator is God," that would clarify, oh, right, they didn't see the movie. All right. What else did they put in this movie that isn't in the Bible?
Noah gets drunk. Noah has some very dark moments. Those are things that some early test audiences were not excited about.
Yeah, you can't slander Noah like that. Who do you think you are? Genesis chapter 9, verse 21. Look, why don't you remember any of this stuff? You did read the same Bible as the rest of us, right?
My memories of the story of Noah are very different. I had this children's Bible when I was a kid, and it had all these illustrations in it. You had the 2 animals walking side by side, and then you had the rainbow, and the dove comes, and then the sun comes out, and everybody lives happily ever after.
Everybody? Nobody lives! Everybody is one family and 2 of every animal. Everybody else drowned. You know how many koala bears drowned? I didn't. Talk to God. I think the problem is they made an Old Testament Bible movie. The Old Testament has stuff in it that you don't necessarily want filmmakers to be faithful to. Just stick to Jesus and you can't go wrong.
Son of God is also generating a lot of heat because Jesus is so sexy. I'm gawking at this actor, and then I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm gawking at Jesus. And then I felt kind of dirty and creepy, right?
Don't worry, I'm sure sexy Jesus forgives you. We'll be right back.
So, Jon Stewart, America's teacher of religion. You laughed, I laughed, but there were also some very serious points that were made in there. For example, what exactly does the Bible say? And how is what the Bible says rendered, both in and out of context, whether the context be the full flood narrative, the Noah cycle, or even the full patriarchal narratives in Genesis 1 through 11, or in any given word or any given verse, let alone the multiple contexts in America within which people are receiving this film, including the context of viewership of blockbuster movies, right, and expectations of them. Also, if you noticed, what language is the Bible written in? And then Jon Stewart at that point says, we won't even go there, right? then also who speaks for, in, or with the Bible in relation to contemporary American culture. A very small handful of select figures were commenting on the adequacy of this cinematic version of the Genesis narrative. By what authority do they speak, and to whom do they speak? And then, in general, is the Bible a kind of icon that is to be protected, an icon over which hangs a sort of halo of the Bible's about this kindly, loving God and people living happily ever after? Or is the Bible about a rather complex library of documents in which a whole host of things are both said about that God, and a whole host of narratives lay out a much more complicated history than they all lived happily ever after? And yet there's something about this sort of the holiness of the Bible. So you have this moment where Stewart argues back about, Genesis 9:21 slandered Noah, right? Slandered Noah against a presumption of Noah as a holy figure, and the Bible as a holy book, which therefore doesn't have drunkenness in it, presumably it doesn't have slaughter of the Earth's population in it, et cetera, et cetera. So you see there are serious points in the humor as well. So how do media sites in the mainstream media, did they fare any better than Jon Stewart? In other words, was Oppenheimer absolutely wrong that Stewart isn't the only one who could make these points or does make these points? I'm going to focus on one particular site for a moment in order to make a few points about of critique about the ways in which religion is assumed to be a category in the contemporary media scene. And I'm going to use the CNN Belief blog as my example. And CNN, of course, is sort of the it's thought to be sort of the mainstream between the so-called extremes of Fox News and MSNBC, whether you buy that characterization or not, right? But CNN is sort of, I hope I won't be accused of going for an obvious, the most tendentious, but nonetheless, here's CNN, I think, trying hard to cover religion. But how do they do it? Well, if you look at this scene here, it's called Belief Blog. And down here it says that the Belief Blog covers the faith angles of today's biggest stories, from breaking news to politics to entertainment, fostering a global conversation about the role of religion and belief in readers' lives. You can see in there that belief and faith are used coterminously, and neither is defined. There's an assumption that what religion is about is belief or faith. That is, in fact, not an assumption that a historian of religions would make. Not all world religions, in fact, define themselves as faiths. Judaism historically, and for many in the contemporary world, is not a faith, it's a way of life, for example. And some would argue that Buddhism is not a faith in the sense of being a credo. And so part of the history of the study of religion is a history of the study of religion which emerged in Europe, and emerged in Europe in its encounters with colonialized peoples. So very often, these early anthropologists and scholars of religion, some of them were missionaries, and others of them were dependent on the accounts of missionaries. And part of their work was to say, okay, let's go in and find out what their creed, their cult, and their code is. Because after all, we all know from our European Christianity that that's what a religion consists in: a creed, a cult, and a code. But of course, if you go and ask the Polynesian Islanders, or if you go and ask many religious devotees, both past and present, is that the way your religion is organized? They would say no. And in fact, as you said, I'm a scholar who works a great deal on the letters of Paul, and I would say that historically it is Paul, the Hellenistic Jew, who was in many ways central in making the Greek term pistis, which we translate into English as both belief and faith, as a central part of the religious movement for which he was a missionary. So in other words, that has historical roots. But CNN, in attempting a kind of pan-religious approach, has used distinctly Christian vocabulary. Now, you could argue that it's the big tent approach, so bring your Baha'i faith in, but nonetheless, I would argue it's on a particular Christian loom that this is being built. I would also say as a scholar that, and a citizen, that it is a little worrisome to me that it's enough to foster a global conversation. I would want some adjectives before that conversation. That is, intelligent conversation, reliable conversation, reasonable conversation, productive conversation, something. But the idea here is just, let's just talk. That's what's needed, is just talk. And so here's my worry especially. Look at the top. My take, my take. The my take corresponds with religion being defined as a belief. So therefore, religion is about what individual persons in the space of their cranium, or perhaps their heart cavity, their chest cavity, think and believe and cherish. But religion is not about money. It's not about social structures. It's not about political power. It's not about systems of thought that have been carved out over years. It's not about rituals. It's just this sort of fuzzy, simple sort of faith belief thing. So therefore, yikes. What happened? Oh, it wants to back up to my time machine at home. You may not. So the problem for me then is that the way in which it's set up is already predisposing a particular view about religion as individual, as private, as rooted in this quasi-unclear belief or faith, which, by the way, in versions of this talk, I've talked a lot over the years about the election in 2012. And in the election in 2012, it was about a contest between two men of faith. And I could show you all my slides with quotes from Mitt Romney and quotes from Barack Obama, and I would give you a quiz and ask you which one is candidate Obama and which is candidate Romney, and you probably hardly can tell, especially if I've scrubbed them of the important historical pebbles. But much of it is that they wanted to show that they were a man of faith. And man of faith sort of means believing certain things, but let's not get too specific about what they are. It means having a loving family and being an all-around good guy. And it means being safely religious, right? Not too scary religious, but enough religious. Some would say that an atheist can't get elected in America. We could maybe debate that afterward. But it's a kind of, the man of faith or man of belief is a kind of safe, vanilla, religious, private, that's your thing. And that's my take. So religion is about my opinion and your opinion. So even when scholars of religion like Stephen Prothero, who's a scholar at Boston University, writes on this site, it's my take. So the scholar of religion is just another opinion alongside all those other opinions. And the basis for that opinion is my take, my opinion, my judgment. Not enough. And doesn't correspond with the way in which I think about what scholarship is. So I went to update that slide because I had been working with that slide back in 2012 and 13. And here's Wednesday of this week. Not all that different, the exact same description. And then we get of Pope Francis. Francis is everywhere. Francis is the religion media star at the moment. If you haven't noticed, you're Rip Van Winkle because he is everywhere. You still get these really great splashy graphics, but you don't have as much my take, but notice, or if you look up here, you see that opinion is one of the tabs. I click on opinion and it just reloads the home page. So it's all opinion, right? That's what it is. It's all opinion. So, this is just summing up what I've said, that religions are not necessarily equivalent to faith, beliefs. Not all world religions would recognize this definition. Religions are complex cultural systems with not only a set of beliefs, but histories, literatures, economic relations, rituals, social organization, norms, and values. And then, crucially important, individuals are related to religious traditions in complex ways, and they construct their religious identities in and through various markers and choices. And that also gets eclipsed on the CNN site, because if someone just says, well, I'm a Mormon, then therefore my take is as a Mormon. But who are you, the Mormon, right? There's only one Mormon, right? So we always have to ask, who are the actors? What are the claims that they are making? How are they based on selective appropriation of the motifs and histories and rituals and claims of those traditions? And why are they speaking in the public realm in this way? What are they seeking to do? And that's what analysis is about. So for a University of Chicago audience, what I'm about to say is just, this is bread and butter to you guys. You know this. You were raised on this, that there's a difference between opinion and argument. And that applies to religion as much as it applies to anything else. And then thirdly, I would add that implications are not self-given. And so every time the next text about Jesus' wife or about the Gospel of Judas or whatever comes along, and people automatically assume this is going to undermine the authority of the Holy Roman Catholic Church, there's a whole series of arguments and inferences that would have to be made for what the implication is of any result of serious research for contemporary communities of faith. Right? Someone could say, fine, they thought that back then, not now, right? But there's always this sort of collapsing in the contemporary media of discovery with clear implication. And so we don't do that. We seek new knowledge through research that is peer-reviewed, checked, critiqued by others with the highest level of training. And then we think about what the implications are. So, as I've said, I talk about talking about religion in public a lot, and the description for today's talk said cases ripped from the headlines, and I decided that Bo Bergdahl's father's beard wasn't enough of interest for us to talk about for a whole hour, and that's one of the stories that's currently going on. If you don't know what I'm speaking about, it's whether his beard was too Muslim or not. And we're not going to talk about that. Instead, I decided to bring you into a story that's not yet fully a big story, and I hope it's of interest to you. It's something that I'm working on right now and thinking about. And so it's the Hobby Lobby Bible curriculum. Have any of you heard about this? Okay, I see about 5 hands or so, 6 or 7 perhaps. I think this is going to be a much bigger story in the years ahead, and so I want to. I thought you might be interested in this. I've also gotten my hands on an advanced copy of the curriculum, which I did not steal. It was first sent to me sort of as a bootleg, but now I know it's up in public on the. I think it's on the Society of Biblical Literature's Facebook page. What I'm about to show you, I actually have a right to see, I think, and to comment on. The news broke on a blog called Religion News Service, that Steve Green, who is the CEO and the family leader of Hobby Lobby, which is the same arts and crafts family that brought the case that went to the United States Supreme Court about which contraceptives could be covered under the Affordable Care Act. And his family has, for the last, I think, decade or so, has been involved, I'm going to slip ahead to this, has been involved in one of the most active purchasing projects of biblical artifacts that we've ever seen. They now own over 40,000 biblical manuscripts, papyri, artifacts from the land of Israel and elsewhere, and they've been developing this body of material as private collectors. They have surrounded it with something they call the Green Scholars Initiative, which has an advisory board, and then they deputize scholars to work on these materials. But of course, this is a really interesting engagement because the scholars can't get to the papyri if they don't work through the Green family who own the papyri. So you now have privileged access to resources that have been purchased out of a family fortune that's estimated by between $2 and $4 billion. They are storehousing these materials, bringing scholars in with privileged access to work on those materials, and then also emphasizing, and they have a whole list of these green scholars, having them engage in training of these students, either at the undergraduate or the graduate level. The scholars on the list overwhelmingly represent conservative Christian institutions in this country and to some degree abroad, although the Green Scholars Initiative's self-presentation is that they want people to think, no, we're doing collections and we're opening this material to scholars of any stripe and background. This is all background to the initiative that they have now launched, which is to write a curriculum for the teaching of the Bible as an elective course in public schools. And so the reason this news broke, though I think it was April 15th, I think it was tax day, was because the school board in Mustang, Texas, which is very close to the corporate headquarters of Hobby Lobby, had voted that evening to bring in this Green Scholars Bible curriculum and use it to be taught in Mustang, Texas next year. So the curriculum about which I'm going to now be discussing, or about which I'm now going to show you some, from which I'm going to show you some examples, will go into effect in some form in August of this year. And Steve Green has been very clear that the goal of this is to get this curriculum in thousands of schools across the United States. And he maintains, and the Green Scholars maintain, that the curriculum that they have written through this apparatus, which includes the private collection, includes the scholars, and includes a to-be-built Bible museum. They've acquired property 2 blocks from the mall, the main mall in Washington, D.C., for a National Bible Museum, which will house these artifacts, etc., that they've been very clear that the goal overall is to enhance biblical literacy in America, and Steve Green has said in his own speeches, to bring America back to her biblical roots and foundations. Okay? So they maintain that the curriculum that they have written is fully within constitutional guidelines. The constitutional guidelines begin with the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Secondly, in the Abingdon v. Shemp case in 1963, that in the secular legislative purpose and primary effect, that neither advances nor inhibits religion, and then went on to say that the Bible is worthy of study for its literary and historic qualities. Nothing we, the justices, have said here indicates that such study of the Bible or of religion, when presented objectively as part of a secular program of education, may not be affected consistently with the First Amendment. So these are the principles against which one should test this or any other Bible curriculum as to whether it meets the test of not advancing nor inhibiting religion. So let me give you a few examples. The first, the curricular goal is very, very clear, and that is to demonstrate to students who take this course that the Bible is the most important book ever written. This goes on to become a curricular claim, and I have cut and paste from the curriculum. The Bible, it says, was the first complete book ever translated from one language to another, Hebrew to Greek. True or false? False. Sumerian and Akkadian bilingual text, Hittite and Hurrian bilingual text, the Rosetta Stone in Egyptian hieroglyphics in Demotic and in Greek. We also have, from a later period, we have Latin versions of the Iliad, the Ilias Latina. We also have Greek versions of Virgil. We have bilingual text, etc. But the other problem is that the Bible isn't one book. And so when they say here, translated from Hebrew to Greek, what do they mean? I don't think they just mean the Septuagint, but they would sort of have, because most of this curriculum is about the Christian Bible and indeed the Protestant Bible, but they must here be referring to the translation of the Scriptures of Israel into Greek at Alexandria, presumably in the 3rd century BCE, but yet even there it wasn't all done at once. And therefore, so when they say the first complete book to be so translated, the Torah was translated probably in the 3rd century BCE from Hebrew to Greek. But this historical claim is, I think, not tenable. Then we have next, this is in the same part of the lesson, the Bible is an enduring document. So the next claim, the Bible was written over a period of 1,500 years by more than 50 writers on 3 continents, ancient copies and fragments still being found in archaeological digs. However, in spite of its origins in times long past, the Bible is still a part of the modern world. It is the only book that has been studied, distributed, and interpreted continuously for more than 1,000 years. So take that, the Tao Te Ching. Take that, the Vedas. Take that, Homer. Many, many counterexamples, of course, of world literature that's been studied over a 1,000-year period. But here, this is quite clearly a large claim about the Bible as being fully different from other texts. Also, I would argue that the 1,500-year period is untenable. The number 50 for the writers can't be sustained, et cetera, et cetera. Now, which Bible? It's quite easy for me as a scholar of the Bible to look into the early parts where they give the copyrights, and you can see which Bibles are being drawn upon. And they are the NIV, the New King James, the New Living Translation, which is a kind of paraphrastic translation. These are Bibles that are used in Protestant Christianity, particularly evangelical Protestant Christianity. So the Jewish Publication Society's magnificent translations of the Tanakh are not here. The New Revised Standard or the Revised Standard and others are not here. Even to say to high school students, this is, of course, about the Bible, and not to complexify what is that Bible and which translation, or even is there such a thing as the Bible? The one you're holding in your hand is a Bible, but there are multiple Bibles. And as you may know, the Catholic Bible contains books that the Protestant canon does not. The Greek Orthodox canon contains an extra psalm and other books that the Protestant canon does not. And of course, the Jewish canon, the Tanakh, which, as you can see, was what was being referred to before about the translations, is not, in fact, the full scope of the curriculum, which extends into the New Testament. In terms of philology, there's some howlers in here. One of my favorites is about the name Jesus. When you read the Greek translation of the Scriptures of Israel, the translation of the name of Yehoshua ben Nun, the figure who takes over after Moses, is Jesus. So he's Jesus, because he and Jesus have, in fact, the same name, Yehoshua. And Yehoshua is sometimes pronounced and written in a shortened form, Yeshua. But here, what you have is that the name Jesus in Hebrew is also pronounced Yehoshua. That's the opposite way in which philology works. Philology works from the original to the translation, not from the translation back to the original. And then in the next page, what we're told is that the names Joshua and Jesus have identical meanings in Hebrew. That might be because they're the same name. So that, I think, is not tenable. There are also historical claims that are made. You can see the tendentiousness of the title. How do we know that the Bible's historical narratives are reliable? Not how do we know if the Bible's narratives are historically reliable. And then I just pulled up one example for you of the ways in which they try to demonstrate that everything in the Bible is historically reliable. So what we have here is the Merneptah Stela. The Merneptah Stela of a pharaoh of Egypt mentions in one line that Israel is laid waste. And this dates from post-1230. So what you have is a datum that there were a people Israel and they were located in Canaan. Then on the next page, what we're told is that Jews then and into today celebrate the Passover. So therefore, these two facts put together demonstrate that the Exodus from Israel was an historical event. So this ancient Israelite practice and the Israelite presence in Canaan mentioned on the Egyptian monument lend supporting evidence to the Jewish people's long-standing written and oral tradition surrounding the Exodus story and supports the likelihood of its historical basis. This is not historical argument. This is tossing a few pebbles of historical evidence to frame the phenomenon. But what we're not getting into is what exactly is the Exodus? Because the Exodus is a very complicated literary narrative. So how many of those features are regarded as historical? The pillar of smoke and fire, et cetera, et cetera. But you see that there's a kind of grab for an historical reliability here. There are also theological claims that are made in the curriculum, and as I hope you can see, I'm following through the criteria of the Chicago School as I name them in assessing this Bible curriculum. And one of them is, what is God like? And we get a list that I think our anchor on Fox News would agree with. That God's gracious, compassionate, God is really nice, God is full of love, God gives victory to his people, faithful and good. We don't have Adonai Ish Milchama, the Lord is a man of war, the Lord is his name. We don't have the first commandment, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the sins of the children of the parents onto the children to the third and fourth generations. Now, my claim isn't to say the real God of the Bible is a bad God. My claim is just to say if you're teaching about the Bible, then the character of the God of Israel is more complex than simply what is God like and a list of a few epithets and a few verses. In other words, argument is needed that attends to evidence and to counter-evidence. And then I pulled up some of the examples of how they deal with the problem of the conquest of Canaan and the cherem, or the destruction of all the living inhabitants of the land. And the answer is, these people were exceptionally wicked. And that's, of course, repeating the biblical claim. It's not assessing the biblical claim and its impact. And then moral and cultural claims. On this page, if you can see, there's Nancy Pelosi. And what we're told is that women's rights have come a long way in America since the early 1900s. And then we see a woman driving, and it says, even though we take driving for granted in America, in some countries women are not allowed to drive just because of their gender. It goes on to say that the biblical story of the Samaritan woman at the well teaches that no one is beyond God's love. And this is in distinction to 2,000 years ago, when some people had more rights and privileges than others in some cultures, especially between a gap between men and women, where wives were bought by the husbands from their fathers, etc. So now what we're told is that this Samaritan woman in John 4 and other stories like it have traveled far into the future to our own time. In the Western world, the laws inspired by the teaching of the Bible ensure that everyone is treated equally. All share the same rights and obligations, no matter if they're rich or poor, atheist or believer, man or woman. So therefore, the Bible is proclaimed here to be the moral and cultural and legal agent of the equality that the book celebrates for American life, and then goes on to say, however, unfortunately, in much of the world, people don't have the benefit of these biblically based laws which have brought about equality in America. Now, this took a little longer than I expected, and we got a little bit of a late start. I just want to conclude by saying the work goes on, the work of assessment. Do the Hobby Lobby folks have a right to collect biblical artifacts? Yes. Do they have a right to write a biblical curriculum and seek to have it tested? Yes. Do we, as scholars who are interested in religion in the public realm, as well as interested in the historical legacies, have a right, and I would say, at least I choose for myself, a responsibility to engage those curricula in a fair-minded but critical way? Yes. And so I hope, although I've gone way too fast, I've given you some examples of things in this curriculum that give me pause as I seek to assess it. So let's open up now for questions and comments.
Yes, are there questions and comments? We have 2 mics, and we will be happy to take your questions. Oh, you see, they're all still thinking. They're digesting.
There's one.
nothing to do with religion, which is slightly different than this example, but it evolves from the same, a similar source, and especially the concern of what you brought up, the Hobby Lobby case that went to the Supreme Court, where in fact it's a conservative agenda to try to kill the Affordable Care Act, which has little to do with religious principles and everything to do with political ideas. And I wonder if you can comment a bit on religion in how religion is used politically.
Great. Thank you for your question. I think I would have to say that I don't think that religion and politics are completely separable or ever have been. Even though, I mean, I understand what you say, that you can yourself make a choice that this issue doesn't have anything to do with religion, and therefore religion doesn't belong in it. And I do think that as a civil society, what that public square looks like and how people can bring religious commitments, ideas, and other things to that public square is one of the acute issues with which we're dealing today. At the same time, I would agree with you that on both counts, that is, that this has a lot to do with politics, and that I think I would take at face value that for the Hobby Lobby people, the issue of contraception has religious implications. I think for them it does. The question is what the religious concerns for them have to do in terms of their employees, have to do in terms of constitutional law and legislation in the United States, and how we judge that. So I do think that these things are united with one another, and I think the best responsibility or the best answer to navigating those territories is to hold people accountable for the claims that they make, and for whom are those claims binding, right? That one could choose in one's own conscience to make any number of decisions vis-a-vis contraception and vis-a-vis other kinds of things. Now, what you see here, though, in light of your point, though, I think throws this all the more into ironic relief. Because for some, the Hobby Lobby case vis-a-vis contraception is in fact a part of a biblical inheritance that means that men have strong claims over women's bodies, and that claim is rooted in the household code, in the New Testament, and other places. And so for some, in fact, the Bible isn't just this agent of egalitarianism. Notice, by the way, there's no Rousseau, there's no Kant, there's no Enlightenment. It's just sort of the Bible pushing this egalitarian agenda that for others would say that actually the Bible is a part of the problem against which the egalitarian agenda has been fought, including, by the way, the example of American slavery, on which the Bible was, as you may well know, invoked on both sides of the abolitionist movements in this country. So I would say that the honest way to teach about the Bible and the history of its effects is to note that the Bible has a multiple and complicated and variegated legacy on these issues, and that it is up for people to make arguments for how they are appropriating or not appropriating that legacy. Although I think the onus is especially on those who are appropriating it. So I think I'm in the spirit of your question, but I can't get off the hook by saying, get religion out of here, this is only about politics, because I think practically in human persons as individuals and in the history of this country and the global world, that religion is a part of that discussion. The question becomes how.
Yeah, I want to echo the first questioner's comment about politics. And part of the point is, of course, that many politicians will use religion for demagogic purposes in order to get votes, and the marrying between the fiscal conservatives and the social conservatives on the right has been a long decades-long history in our politics, and one striking example, and if you bear with me a moment, is the abortion issue, which the evangelical Christians, you know, in the 60s and 70s thought was a Catholic issue. And then when they realized that it would gain supporters for their sides, they started moving and started using that issue. And one of the problems with our public discourse about this is that when we hear discussion of an issue like that, we hear talk about, well, the various opinions, as you cite, but no real discussion of, well, does it make any theological sense to talk about a magic moment when the soul gets infused in the body? Or isn't that kind of an absurd way of looking at things? And that's why our public discourse is so degraded.
Well, I completely agree with you that there are all kinds of alignments, and some of them are predictable, and some of them are kind of shocking. I remember in the last election, Rick Santorum, remember when he said, because when John F. Kennedy ran for president in the 1960s, as an Irish Catholic, his religion was a really big question, and for many it was, does that mean the Pope is sitting next to him in the White House, and what does that mean? And Kennedy gave a speech in which he said, I am not running as a Catholic candidate, and I would not serve as a Catholic president. I am a citizen, et cetera, et cetera. And Rick Santorum, also a Catholic candidate in 2012, said the Kennedy speech made him nauseous. Right? So it's not the case that, and that's why I said about individuals appropriating their religious traditions and identities in different ways, that one of the, there are a lot of complicated people, and there are a lot, though, of coalitions that are done through bumper sticker argumentation and through demonization, rhetoric of demonization. And we've seen this especially since the 1970s, and it's proven shockingly and to our real peril effective in dividing this country. And so what I think the answer is, and you're asking me, and I'm an educator, so I think education is one of the ways in which we seek to train students to be critical thinkers to assess arguments. Now, when it comes to the soul and the conception and other kinds of things, one of the things that's fallen out of literacy in this country is literacy about religious traditions, which I'm not sure it was ever that great to begin with, but it certainly is low now. You've seen the Pew studies that people are even ignorant of their own religious traditions, ones that they claim, right? 30% can't name, X, Y, or Z among Protestants, Catholics, Jews, and others. So there's that. But the other is philosophical. That people don't get the kind of philosophical training that you had to have in the Corps if you were here at Chicago. You had to have some sense of what it means to think with full rigor and at some level of abstraction about complex issues. And that, I think, is really a problem. So there's a long, long history of discussion that is not being invoked, and it's baby killers versus woman haters, and the argument goes nowhere.
Sadly, we're not going to have enough time for all the questions, but we have time for one more, and we have two people here.
Mine's quick. The answer won't be, but the question's quick. If religion prescribes ways of life, not just a set of beliefs, and those are inconsistent with politics or culture at large, is it not fundamentally incompatible with a pluralistic society that religion coexist with society and politics? And even if it isn't inconsistent with or incompatible with it, does it not need at least to be subordinate to politics and the bigger?
Well, the first thing I want to say is, of course, politics isn't holy either, right? I mean, that if our goal is to put our full confidence for human arrangement in politics, that doesn't make it necessarily better, right? I think what I would say about religion is, first of all, we live in, the so-called post-secular age. That is, that the secularization thesis that said that, we had all those who pulled down the pants on religion. Freud, Marx, Durkheim, Weber, you read them in the core, right? Religion is a society. Religion is just an economic order. Religion is all, these the great reductionists. And yet here we are in 2014, and the world is no less, and in fact, in some ways, some would argue more religious. So what to do? What I think that the key issue is that religion is not a single thing. Islam is not a single thing. Protestant Christianity is not a single thing. Zoroastrianism is not a single thing. And that's what I mean about public accountability. That is that people inside who choose, and we're Americans, we're modern people. We don't think as much about ancestral religion, right? We think people choose religion. In fact, that's not absolutely the case. And I could go around the room and ask you what your name is and where you came from and whatever. And for many of you, you have an ancestral religion. That is that you were born somewhere and into a family, et cetera, et cetera. But this idea that religion is a matter of choice, it's also a matter of accountability. And so the religions of the world have within them great stores of both wisdom and things that can be and have proven to be exceedingly dangerous. And that's why I think that people who choose to adopt that religious tradition as a framework and way of life are also accountable to the public realm. And that's what pluralism is. Because you're not going to get monism the other way, right? You're not going to get, it didn't work in the Soviet Union, right? Get out the religion and now there's just one Soviet man. No. Right? So the question becomes then that people should know the traditions that they are espousing, and they should be able to argue the values and other claims that they want to make in the public realm, and people could choose to say we agree or we don't agree. And I think that seems to me the best ingredient for a just civil society.
Okay, we have some issues of time, but I know there are still questions, and I'm wondering whether you would be willing to stay a few minutes to
absolutely.
take...
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
and for those of you who want to run to the beer garden to pay tribute to Noah because, please feel free to do so, but we'll stay and take a few more questions.
Great. Thank you.
All right.
Happy to.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I just want to say that the First Amendment has the no establishment clause, but it also has the free exercise clause. And so the founders saw both difficulties for the Republic, that you had to allow both. But it seems to me that picking on the Hobby Lobby curriculum is kind of a straw man and a softball. It's the ACLU, I'm sure, will go after it, just like on the creationism cases, and it should be cleansed of the parts that are not factual. But it seems to me that as somebody who came out of the schools in the 60s, where all of that was taken out, and there was no religion studied in the Common Core here, I was class of 74, my religion, my education was less good. My son, who graduated from high school in 2008, took a Bible as literature course in public school in Santa Monica, and then came to the University of Chicago and knew enough to tell me that ridiculous movie about Noah was based on the book of Enoch, that actually had some kind of quasi-biblical thing. That's a better education, and that we need to have more education about the Bible in the schools so that people are not learning the Bible from their own religion.
Well, I hope it's clear that what I said, I'm an educator. I believe in education. I think the Bible should be taught in public schools. I hope I've been clear on that. But the question is how. And what Bible, and what are the both interpretive choices and the hermeneutical lenses that how are people taught how to read and how to read with historical sophistication, et cetera, et cetera. In other words, students should have access to the very best and most sophisticated scholarship on religion as they do in sociology or psychology or science or any of the other things, right? So, So I completely agree with you. It's a part of what it means to be an educated person. It's also the case that it does require some confidence or some choice to say, I am going to engage my religion or someone else's religion in a public realm. And so if you come to Swift Hall, Swift Hall, one of my arguments is that we play with fire. We talk about religion, and we teach people how to do it. And you have to clear a space. You have to put rocks around it. But a part of what the rocks are is that there's no default setting. So neither the person internal to the tradition nor the person external to the tradition. It's a matter of how good is the argument. Read the evidence, make an argument about it, and know what kind of an argument you're making. A lot of the Hobby Lobby curriculum confuses completely theological and historical claims and doesn't tell the reader we're doing these things together because we believe that the theological claim is dependent upon the historical reliability, right? So be honest about the questions that are being asked and pursue them with full rigor. Now, this is and isn't an easy target. Because, as I said, this has only been out for 6 weeks, and it has an empire underneath it. I was a witness for another case that actually didn't go to trial for another National Bible curriculum, and it was a small nonprofit group that was promoting this Bible curriculum. To give you one example, I read into the Bible curriculum, and it said, if you're going to learn about the Bible, you ought to know the Old Testament, so this is a Christian Bible curriculum, is written in Hebrew. So let's teach you the Hebrew alphabet. I'm thinking, oh, cool. I believe in teaching languages. I think being able to read the sources is key. Now, as you may or may not know, the Hebrew alphabet, originally the alphabet were pictographs. So Beit is a bayit, which is a house. So usually when you get these charts of the alphabet, you get the little picture, and then it's like Beit, and then you can remember, oh yeah, Beit is a house, Yad is a hand, etc. They get down to Tav, to the very last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and it says Tav, this is the cross on which Jesus died. Now that's low-hanging fruit, right? I mean, that's really easy to show, this is a Christian bias, this is a Christian kind of even gematria that goes back to the 3rd or 2nd centuries, and et cetera, et cetera. But this curriculum has an empire underneath it, including, that's why I told you about, you've got sources that no one else has access to that you've been buying. You're basically alluring scholars and putting them up on the masthead on the argument that they can work with the sources. I mean, it would drive me nuts for somebody to say, we just found Origen's homilies on the Psalms in Greek. I work on Origen and Gregory of Nyssa and people like that, and you can't have it, right? So I need to sign up, right? And then the other thing that's behind it is this claim that they want both a National Bible Museum, and I didn't get into this, but the latter chapters of the book show, or they intended to show, that America is a Christian nation founded on biblical Christian notions. They do the Judeo-Christian hyphenated sort of, the hyphen covers all the problems kind of thing, right? Judeo-Christian nation, that's where it's headed, right? And so this is a very strong, very powerful tool that I think deserves the attention that I'm giving to it. So.
We truly have run over our time, and I think this room is going to be used.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Again, if we have...
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.